Hello, and welcome back to the Classic Soap Operas podcast. Today, we're rewinding all the way to November 8th, 1965, the very first day that Days of Our Lives hit the air. You've heard it. Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. But how did this legendary soap opera begin? Who were the visionaries behind it? And what made those early storylines so bold, even shocking for their time? We're diving deep into the origins of Days, the creators, the original characters, and those dramatic early plots that laid the groundwork for one of the most iconic daytime dramas in TV history. So sit back, grab your favorite drink, and let's step into Salem as it all began.
Like sands through the hourglass. Gosh, that opening has been part of daytime TV for, nearly 60 years now? Did you ever wonder how Days of Our Lives, this show that's just endured, actually got its start?
Well, today that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking a deep dive into the origins of Days. We'll look at the initial vision, what they first imagined.
Right.
The key people involved in creating it, and maybe some of those early storylines that were surprisingly bold. They really set the stage for its incredibly long run.
So we're going right back to the beginning, 1965.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the debut, the themes, the characters that first, grabbed audiences.
Okay. And to really get a handle on how this daytime giant started, we've looked at quite a few sources. Encyclopedia.com, SoapHub, Wikipedia.
And also a really interesting review of a book called Her Stories, Daytime Soap Opera in U.S. Television History, plus an article from NBC Insider.
Got it. And so our mission, really, is to unpack those foundational pieces of Days.
Exactly. We want to show what made it unique right out of the gate and how it sort of reflected the TV world back then, but also how it sometimes pushed the envelope, for you listening.
Okay, let's do it. Let's rewind. November 8th, 1965. NBC. Who are the masterminds?
Well, it was really a team effort. Ted Corday, Erna Phillips, and Alan Chase. And interestingly, they kind of used Erna Phillips's other big hit.
Oh, As the World Turns.
That's the one. For Procter & Gamble, it served as a sort of model, a successful template they could build on.
So what was the core idea? What kind of show were they aiming for?
They wanted a mix, really. Part family-focused story like those old radio novels, those long serials.
Right, like One Man's Family.
Exactly like that. And they wanted to blend that with the medical drama feel that Erna Phillips was, pretty famous for.
And the setting, Salem, that was intentional.
Oh, yeah, very deliberate.
Right.
Unapologetically Midwestern, Salem.
And right from day one, it had that opening line.
Absolutely. Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. Voiced by MacDonald Carey, who was a former film actor.
Who became totally identified with the show.
Totally. And at the start, it was just a half-hour show.
But Carey wasn't just the voice, right? He was a major character.
Oh, absolutely. He played Dr. Tom Horton.
Yeah.
The town doctor, yes, but also the Rock, the patriarch of the Horton family.
And he was there from the very beginning until, 1994.
Yeah, right from episode 1 until he passed away. And the character did, too. A huge presence.
And playing his wife, Alice Horton, was Frances Reed.
Yes, Frances Reed is Alice. The dutiful wife who became this real anchor, a veteran figurehead over the years.
So that very first episode, what happened? What was the hook?
Well, apparently it kicked off with their granddaughter, Julie, and some friends getting caught trying to steal a fur coat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, big teenage trouble. And we also saw Alice feeling kind of wistful, about her kids growing up and leaving home, all except Marie, the youngest.
So it started with that relatable family stuff, but I get the feeling things didn't stay quite so simple.
Not for long, no. The show moved pretty quickly beyond just everyday family issues. It started bringing in storylines that were pretty surprising, even taboo for the mid-'60s.
Okay.
This willingness, right from the start, to tackle more controversial stuff, maybe even sensitive topics, that really made Days stand out from the pack. It signaled a bolder approach.
Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. Ted Corday passed away in 1966, pretty early on. How did that affect things?
Well, it was significant. His widow, Betty Corday, stepped up, and the head writer, Bill Bell, became incredibly influential. And it was around this time, according to one writer, Gerard Waggett, that Days started playing around with the incest taboo.
Whoa, okay. Incest. That's heavy stuff for daytime TV back then. Must have caused a stir.
Oh, definitely. It was pushing boundaries. Like one early plot had Marie Horton, remember, the youngest daughter.
Yeah.
She marries, then divorces the father of the guy she used to be engaged to. Then things get even more complicated. She falls for a man who turns out to be her long-lost brother.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, it was this huge dramatic twist, and it actually led to her character joining a nunnery.
Wow. That is quite the storyline. And it sounds like they kept exploring these really complex, controversial relationships.
They did. There was the whole Mickey-Laura-Bill triangle. Laura was married to Mickey, but she really loved his brother, Bill.
Okay, classic soap triangle.
But it got dark. Bill rapes Laura,
Uh-huh.
and then later they actually got married. It was apparently so impactful it inspired a similar plot on Guiding Light,
Yeah.
which was the kind of influence Days was already having.
And this willingness to go into darker territory wasn't just on Days.
Right. Pat Falcon-Smith, who co-wrote for Days early on and really shaped things, she later wrote a really controversial rape seduction story for General Hospital. And back on Days, you had Doug Williams first going after young Julie Olson, then marrying her mother Addie, having a kid with Addie,
Right.
and then kind of predictably for a soap, Addie dies and he ends up back with Julie. So yeah, those early years definitely weren't afraid of complicated, often scandalous relationships.
So Bill Bell left in 1973. Did that mark another big change?
It did mean Pat Falcon-Smith came back as head writer for a couple of periods, though maybe not continuously. And interestingly, around then, it seems they considered exploring lesbian and interracial relationships.
Really? In the 70s?
Yeah, but apparently the network got nervous about viewer reactions, so those ideas got shelved. It kind of shows you the limitations they were working under back then.
Fascinating. But Days also brought in things that became hugely popular, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The late 70s brought Dr. Marlena Evans. She became an instant fan favorite, a real heroine.
Ah, Marlena. Iconic.
But that same period also had the Salem Strangler storyline, which was intense. So intense they actually killed off several established characters. That was a pretty bold move back then.
Killing off regulars.
Well,
Wow. But then came the 80s, and the whole Supercouple thing really exploded, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
General Hospital had massive success with Luke and Laura, and Days definitely leaned into that. They started cultivating their own iconic couples.
Who are we talking about here?
Oh, Marlena and Roman, Bo and Hope, Kimberly and Shane, Kayla and Steve, Patch and Kayla. These pairs became huge. Their stories were often more adventurous, sometimes set far away from Salem.
Right, more action-packed.
Yeah, and they were frequently up against these larger-than-life villains,
Yeah.
like Victor Kiriakis and, of course, Stefano D'Amara.
Stefano, the man who never stayed dead.
Exactly. His resurrections became legendary. It was part of the fun, almost.
And even with these supercouples, it sounds like they revisited some earlier themes.
They did. Like Kayla and Steve's story had a sibling triangle and even shades of that rape redemption idea, which is, a pretty controversial trope where romance follows assault. And they kept playing with identity twists, classic soap stuff. Like Roman coming back. To see Roman, no, he's John Black, whose identity kept shifting.
Ah, yes, the John Black saga. Then the 90s hit and things got, well, pretty wild, right? More fantasy.
Yeah, the 90s were a definite shift. Ken Corday was producing, and James Riley came in as head writer. He was innovative, provocative maybe, and Days just went full-on fantasy sometimes.
Yeah.
You had Vivian Alamain burying people alive, stealing embryos, just outlandish stuff.
And, of course, the most famous one.
Marlena's demonic possession.
Right.
Morphing into animals, levitating. John Black performing an exorcism because he was a priest then.
Gosh, I remember that. It was huge.
Huge. And then Stefano imprisoned her. He was just out there.
It sounds like the focus maybe shifted a bit from just couples to these bigger, crazier entanglements.
Yeah, you could argue super triangles became more common than super couples. And you saw more of these scheming female characters trying to break up the main pairs.
Like Sammy Brady.
Exactly. Teenage Sammy, or Scammy as fans called her online. Her obsession with Austin, constantly messing with his relationship with her sister Carrie. She was relentless.
So how did viewers react to this? More fantastical turn.
It was definitely mixed. A lot of longtime fans were apparently not thrilled. They missed the more grounded drama. But interestingly, younger viewers seemed to really dig it. And the ratings actually went up in the mid-90s. It got so noticeable that people started talking about the daisification of other soaps.
Meaning other soaps started copying that style.
Yeah, trying to add more fantasy, faster pacing, more sensational plots to capture some of that same buzz.
But was there a downside to that?
Well, some critics worried about it. They felt Days' focus on, quote, postmodern escapism might actually be making the whole soap genre less appealing overall by the late 90s, like maybe alienating older viewers without locking in the younger ones long term.
Okay, let's jump back again to the very early days, the 60s. Besides the main Hortons, who else was populating Salem back then?
Oh, there were quite a few key players. You had Tony Merritt, who was engaged to Marie Horton, remember?
Yeah, the one who joined the nunnery eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tony left town sick, came back, found she'd married his father, Craig Merritt. They tried again later, Tony and Marie, but it didn't work out. And Craig, the father, he married Marie, but then stepped aside so Tony could have another shot. Talk about complicated.
No kidding. Sets the tone, doesn't it? Who else?
Well, there was Ben Olson, Addie Horton's husband, Julie's father. He moved to Paris with Addie, left Julie behind with Tom and Alice, and died off screen later.
Okay.
His son, Steve Olson, Julie's brother, also went to Paris, but came back kind of troubled, got involved in drug smuggling, added a bit of crime element.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was David Martin. He was an early flame for Julie, but he married her friend, Susan Hunter, because Susan was pregnant.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Tragically, their little boy died, and Susan, in her grief, actually killed David.
She killed him.
Yeah. And then, plot twist, Julie finds out she's pregnant with David's other child.
Good grief. These early plots were intense. What about inside the Horton family itself, beyond Tom and Alice's kids? Any spouses causing drama?
Oh, yeah. Kitty Horton, married to Tommy Horton, she had an affair. Someone secretly recorded her talking about it, which led to a confrontation with Bill Horton. And then she had a fatal heart attack during the struggle. So Bill became a suspect. Classic soap cliffhanger material.
Definitely.
Dr. Elliot Kincaid was the guy she had the affair with. And things got even messier when Tommy, who everyone thought was dead, suddenly came back.
Of course he did.
Sandy Horton was Kitty, and Tommy's daughter. That role was played by a bunch of different actresses over time. And David Banning. He was Julie's son with David Martin Jr.
Right, the second baby.
Yeah. Complicated backstory, adoption stuff.
Yeah.
He later had a son, Eli Grant, before dying off screen himself. You really see that multi-generational story starting early.
It's incredible how layered it was from the start. Any other key 60s introductions we should mention?
Mike Horton's a big one. Son of Laura Horton. Raised thinking Mickey was his dad, but it was actually Bill.
Another paternity twist.
Exactly. And Mike holds the record for being the most recast character in Day's history. He had tons of storylines, became a doctor himself, keeping that medical theme going.
It really is amazing how intricate that initial web of characters and stories was. And this all fits into what that book review, the Her Stories one, was talking about, right? The bigger picture of daytime TV.
Absolutely. That review really highlights the shift from radio soaps to TV soaps and how central daytime TV became, especially for middle-class housewives back then. It was tied up with consumer culture, too.
Right.
But what's really key is how female creators, like Erna Phillips, used this medium. They were actually addressing real issues women were facing after the war. You know, work, reproductive rights, problems in marriage.
So they weren't just fluff, they were tackling serious stuff.
Exactly. The review calls soaps a site of the production of gender knowledge. Basically, they were exploring and maybe even shaping how society thought about gender roles. And even later, with the Supercouples, yeah, they were mostly white and straight, but their stories still became ways to talk about things like abortion or sexual assault or female pleasure. It came up in dialogue.
Interesting.
The review also mentions early, maybe backgrounded, attempts to touch on race and sexuality. And it talks about the challenges later on, you know, with cable and streaming, viewership declining.
The post-network era struggles.
Right. But also how shows like Days tried to adapt, bringing in more diverse characters, interracial couples, LGBTQ plus stories.
So they've tried to evolve with the times.
Yeah, the review sees soaps as this kind of cultural space where social issues get talked about, maybe even normalized over time, including how something like sexual assault has been portrayed differently over the decades and how viewers reacted.
So after all this time, all these decades of drama and change, what's the lasting legacy of Days of Our Lives?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, expanding to an hour back in 75, doing primetime specials in the 90s, McDonald Carey's voice opening the show for so long, unforgettable.
Truly.
And you've got Suzanne Rogers, Maggie Horton Kyriakis, she's the longest-serving cast member currently on the show, and Susan Seaford Hayes, Julie Olsen-Williams. She's the only actor who's been on the show in all 7 decades it's existed.
That's incredible.
Incredible. And it had famous fans, too. Julia Roberts, apparently, and even Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall.
Wow. And it's won its fair share of awards, I imagine.
Oh, tons of daytime Emmys.
Yeah.
And then the big move after 57 years on NBC, shifting to Peacock in 2022. That shows real staying power, adapting like that.
Definitely.
And through it all, even with all the crazy plots and cast changes, the Horton family is still there anchoring it. Their legacy is secure.
So wrapping this up, Days started as this mix, right? Family drama, medical stuff, but it really quickly went into these groundbreaking, sometimes shocking storylines, all centered around the Hortons.
Yeah, and over the years it evolved so much. The focus shifted. We got the supercouples and that wild fantasy era. But it always seemed to reflect or maybe even challenge what was happening in society. That's why it's had such an impact.
Understanding where it came from really gives you, the listener, some perspective on how daytime TV changed, how storytelling itself changed on TV.
Absolutely. And you can see how cultural norms were shown and sometimes pushed against for decades. That early mix of relatable family stuff with those completely unexpected, some scandalous twists that really set a pattern, didn't it? You still see echoes of that today.
Okay, final thought then. Considering everything, the audacious plots, the tangled relationships, right from the very start, what do you think is the biggest reason Days of Our Lives managed to not just hang on, but actually thrive for so long? How did it keep reinventing itself but still feel like Days, still have that iconic opening feel true after all this time?
And that wraps up our deep dive into the early days of Our Lives, from family-centered storylines to the groundbreaking plots that pushed boundaries and set the tone for decades to come. Did you enjoy this episode? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, share your favorite early days memory, or let us know what classic soap storyline you want us to explore next. Thanks for listening to the Classic Soap Operas podcast. Until next time, remember, like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.